MGF's Al15 single-point lifting beam has a capacity to lift loads of up to 15 tons, with a maximum span of 6 meters. The single-point lift vastly reduces sling lengths, making it an ideal solution for lifts with restricted headroom. Single-point adjustable beams consist of a main beam, made up of back-to-back channels and end plates, which act as support feet, an upper lift point which must be adjusted to suit the center of mass of the load, and a choice of 2, 3 or 4 lower hanging points, which can be adjusted in 250 mm increments along the beam, to suit required hanging positions. 5 hanging points are available in total, as the central lifting point has a hanging point below. The beam and central lift plate weigh 772 kilograms, and each lift point adds an extra 13 kilograms. Specified weights include for shackles but not slings. Endless round slings are available in a variety of lengths to suit the application. The principal benefit of a single-point lifting beam is to prevent the load being lifted from experiencing compressive forces that would be generated by multi-leg slings at an angle which could crush and damage the item. The lifting beam spans over the load and provides vertical slings to support the lift about its center of gravity. The number of supports depends on how capable the load being lifted can span under its self-weight. The central lift point must be positioned above the center of mass of the object being lifted and be connected to the main beam with 4 M30 by 85 grade 8.8 bolts, nylock nuts and washers. Place a suitable sling or chain into the 17-ton bow shackle and connect to the top hole. Hanging points should be positioned at points along the load to achieve a balanced lift. Secured to the main beam with 2 M30 by 85 grade 8.8 bolts, nylock nuts and washers. Place suitable hanging slings or chains into the 9.5-ton bow shackles and connect to each lower hole in the hanging points. A minimum of 2 threads must be visible beyond the nut, and all bolts should be retightened before each lifting operation. Please see user guide for weights of individual components, and only manually handle items which are safe and comfortable to do so. Attach free end of upper sling to crane hook. Attach hanging slings to the load. The center of gravity of the load must be calculated with the beam and vertical slings arranged accordingly to ensure a safe and even lift. Before operatives use the equipment, they should be aware of these warnings. Ensure a lifting plan and rams are in place, and that the assembled beam and ancillaries are thoroughly checked by a competent person prior to each lifting operation. The lifting beam cannot be used if the beam deviates more than 6 degrees from level when lifting the load. The lower slings cannot be rigged at more than a 6-degree angle. Do not exceed the stated working load limit for the overall assembly, and for each particular component, taking into account the load share between hanging points. Only use the upper handle to manually relocate the hanging point. It must not be directly loaded. A slinger, signaller or banksman should be appointed for the lift with plant exclusion zones. No persons should be in the vicinity of the lift, and the loads should not be suspended over occupied areas. When moving the load, use tag lines to control movement. Individual components can be heavy, and extreme care must be taken if manual handling. Check user manual for weights. The equipment must be used in accordance with the procedures from Lifting Operations and Lifting Equipment Regulations 1998, LOLA. Operatives using this system should be suitably trained, competent and have a clear understanding of safe slinging procedures. Prior to lifting a load with an adjustable lifting beam, there are several checks which should be done. Inspect the slings prior to each lift. Ensure they are not twisted or tangled. ID tags are present, no broken or worn stitches, and there are no holes, tears, cuts or embedded material within the sling. Ensure the smaller shackles are attached to the bottom of the beam. Ensure that the center of gravity of the object being lifted is positioned underneath the master link. If the Al15 beam is being lifted by wheeled or tracked machines, then they must remain stationary throughout. A beam must never be transported whilst under load. Outriggers should be used where possible. Loaded beams should be moved carefully to avoid shock loading and kept clear of obstacles. Any contact could cause unsafe release of load or beam failure. It is recommended to first conduct a test lift, lifting the load slightly off the ground to ensure the lift is stable. If not, then the load must be lowered and hanging points adjusted accordingly. Each component needs to be checked prior to each lift. Consult MGF representative before lifting if you are unsure about any aspect of these rules.